But let's move on and talk about the aberration which is happening in the EV space. I don't know whether to term it as aberration or whether a change of how the landscape is going to really look like, given that it started off with Delhi government, and they've definitely given EVs a major push. They've asked aggregators as well as delivery services in Delhi to have an EV fleet. So let's try and understand what this move really means and how the overall landscape of EVs in India is likely to pan out like. We have with us Hormazd Sorabjee as well as BVR Subbu too joining in on the show right now. Gentlemen, hi, good morning. Thanks as always for joining in. Subbu, if I could start off with you, given this big news, now that in Delhi you're going to have e-com as well as aggregators which are being asked to now go EV with their new fleet, wanted to understand what's been your take on this?
Well, I think it was bound to happen. Look at it like this, that the e-commerce guys, for instance, can always switch very rapidly to electric three-wheelers. There are already a couple of 2 or 3 Indian manufacturers producing decent quality three-wheelers. I know some others are willing to, just waiting to come in. Some people are talking of four-wheelers in that space too, cargo four-wheelers and so on. But I think that part of it is not so much of an issue. It can happen almost instantly. It's only a matter of ramping up production of EVs. And I'm not talking of the e-rickshaws that you see outside Delhi metro stations. Those are, those are not really what one would consider appropriate vehicles for large-scale cargo movement. As far as cars is concerned, I think we have a long way to go there in terms of creating the production capabilities. Because what really is happening is that you need to have products that are appropriate to the requirement of cab aggregator companies, for instance. They don't need large vehicles. They need, let's say, vehicles which are 3+1 seats, and that I think is something that will need a bit of doing. I don't believe the Indian industry is quite ready for that. I do know that a couple of, at least one international company has been working on a small electric vehicle for India. I believe Tata Motors is well poised to get into that space. It has the competency and the capability to do that. So I expect that will also not be too much of an issue. I think that is going to happen probably, you'll see supplies coming in on a regular basis, I would say about 9 months or 12 months from now. I would completely discount the Chinese assemblers in the EV space who are already there. I don't see them as serious long-term players unless they have, unless they grow deep roots in terms of the production capabilities of the country. So I'm not even looking at those. I believe there'll be two companies really that will probably make the cut out there. So even that is not a problem. Yeah, it'll happen now. It's happened in Delhi. It'll happen in other cities as well.
Hormazd, this is an avenue which is just about opening up. You had unlisted players in the market already, and then you've got the likes of Bajaj as well as Hero MotoCorp as well entering the market right now. I guess it started right now with e-commerce as well as delivery giants, and it could very well, like Subbu just mentioned, perhaps spread across to cab aggregators too, for that matter. Who right now has the wherewithal to capture a large portion of the e-com market? And would it be the first mover advantage who's going to bag it all right now?
Well, as Subbu rightly said, I think, this sort of regulation was bound to happen. And, I think having an EV in your portfolio is now an insurance. 10 years back, it was a gamble to get into EVs. Today, it's a gamble not to be in EVs. And clearly, this is an insurance you have to have in your back pocket, because you never know overnight when a government will suddenly say, hey, no more IC engines, you can only use EVs for this. So clearly, it makes sense for the e-commerce aggregators. I think, there are a lot of, let's say, last mile delivery vehicles in the works. We know Mahindra, obviously, they've got their three-wheeler, their work that is doing quite well. In fact, Obviously, there are low voltage solutions. You've got higher voltage solutions. I think Tata's working on an ACE electric vehicle. So a lot of these are still in the works. But, it's right now, in terms of the EV race globally, we are far, far behind. I think the company that's really taken lead is Tata Motors, but it's an early lead in what is going to be a marathon. I mean, they've done some exceptional stuff in just getting vehicles out there. Very simple vehicles. They've just been IC conversions, but they've now got that insurance in their back pocket. And for a taxi aggregator, frankly, they're the only option right now. There really is no one else. So, I mean, if cabs, all cabs have to be EVs, then I think Tata's the one who's going to get that bonanza because really there's no one else. So I think, companies, I think this is their biggest fear. While the private sector, it'll be more gradual as people slowly adapt, get over range anxiety. It's really, in, let's say, in fleets where there are certain regulations, and that's what regulation is going to drive. And in India, regulations just happen overnight. Very often they're even knee-jerk. They happen overnight. There's smog in Delhi, and everyone dreads that when there's smog, there's something going to happen. Then they'll forget about it until the next year, and again they'll announce some sort of drastic measure to kind of control pollution as if it all exists only in one part of the country. But anyway, that's the reality. As I said, EVs are now insurance, and the people who have it are well insured.
Subbu, good morning. Nikunj also joining in. Good to connect with you after a while. What happens to the incumbents then? Because the car business or the automobile business is a tough business. It is not like an FMCG business where your margins are 25-30%. It's a business where your margins are in early teens. Now there would be perhaps a desire to add more value to the existing models. There is a commodity pressure and there is a pressure of disruption. So what happens to the incumbents right now? How do you think they will come back in a business which is brutally competitive and highly dependent on commodities?
Well, I'd be very, most automobile companies would be very happy to see their margins in the early teens. I think it's more in the range of 3 to 5% that they live with, and they've learned to live with. There are very few exceptions. I mean, I would imagine except for Maruti, Suzuki, and Hyundai in India, I don't think anybody else has reached that level. Having said that, a lot of re-engineering is already happening with in the automotive industry. It's one thing to shoehorn an electric powertrain into an existing IC engine vehicle, but to take it forward and really make it globally competitive and globally acceptable, you have to think in terms of lightweighting. You have to think of basic architecture issues. But beyond the architecture issues and the lightweighting, which is the mechanical part of it, there is going to be an enormous amount of electronics work that's going to be happening behind the scenes. And I think that is going to make the difference between also rans and the winners. Now, if you drive, let's say a Tesla, for instance, and then you see the kind of interface that you have between the consumer and the vehicle, it's unbelievable. Yes, the automotive industry has caught up. Some people like Volkswagen have really caught up with that. BMW and Hyundai Kia combination, all three of them have caught up significantly on that interface. But I can't see that happening as yet. A lot of lightweighting activities have to happen. As far as the material issues are concerned, I think when batteries today, yes, are very highly cobalt and lithium dependent, but you would see, I expect, within the next 3 years, significant advances in solid state. And once that happens, you would see smaller batteries, probably faster recharge time, definitely faster recharge times, more mass production, less prone to the vicissitudes of the resources like lithium or cobalt. I think all that will happen. Chemistry and material science development is proceeding much further, which is what I think the Indian government could really focus on. In its labs, if it wants to really make EVs a big thing in India. Reality is we are so far behind on material sciences in this country that it's unbelievable. So you would need to have capabilities built up in that. You need to do that, and then you can build a for base. Till then, I think it's going to be we are going to be scratching the surface.
Almost right now, Tatas have an advantage. I've been told that 7 out of 10 electric vehicles which have been sold in India, even though number is in thousands, it's not in 6-digit. 7 out of 10 cars are in India sold by Tatas. But given that EV is going to be a big disruptive and it's a big sector which is going to only become bigger, do you see brutal competition or intense competition also kicking in? I mean, I just want to remind our viewers that there was a time in India where there were almost 12 car manufacturers. Only a handful of them survived. What happens in the EV business? Competition will intensify, competition will not be there, the first mover advantage will not change. How do you see the landscape changing, Hormazd?
Well, I think competition will intensify, but the way the landscape is turning out, not everyone's getting into EVs for whatever reason. I mean, you don't have plans of, let's say, Volkswagen doing a mass market EV, or Skoda doing a mass market EV, or Honda doing a mass market EV. It's just a handful of players, because I think what's very interesting in the way the dynamic of the Indian market working out is. The global players, they've got their EV battles to fight in other markets, which are probably bigger and more lucrative. The Indian players, their survival is in India. They have nowhere else. So I think what you will see is you will see companies like Tata. You will see companies like Mahindra, late startup, but they are also planning. You will see companies like Maruti and Toyota also going heavily headlong into EVs. They've got massive plans, developing a wide range of EVs, but won't come for a while. You've got, of course, the Koreans, which are the giants in this space, and they've also got massive plans. So what I see it for the next 5 years, you've just got a handful of players. And until 5 years, frankly, there's only Tata Motors, or let's say 4 years. You've got MG as well right now, which has done well. And, I wouldn't discount the Chinese, because they are, in technology also quite way up in the EV race. Don't forget, battery makers like CATL are actually owned by SAIC, which is MG's parent group. But, I think the big challenge is the supply chain. It is still so underdeveloped. I mean, today also we don't have battery cell manufacturing in India of a certain scale. I mean, it's like, not having all the components of an engine. Today, the battery is the new engine, and we still don't have that manufacturing capability in India. We get the cells, okay, we assemble the packs, but it's still very nascent, the supply chain. So the supply chain has to grow, to support this. Otherwise, EVs will continue to be expensive when you're really dependent on a lot of imports. And let's face it, that's what the Tata Nexon EV is. It was a quick and easy way to get in. They got a lot of componentry and just assembled it here. Largely, they had an existing platform. I think it's a great way to start, but as Subbu said, that's not really the final step. Then you have to start moving to dedicated EV platforms, and finally skateboards, which has no vestige of an IC engine in it at all. It's just designed, optimized for electric propulsions. So they are lighter, they are more space efficient, and you get some interesting designs on them as well.
Hormazd, good morning. This is Nayantara. So like you said, having EV is like an insurance. Yesterday, what we saw was Hero Motor being the top gainer on the index. That's after it put out a press release about how it's going to drive in its own electric vehicle in the month of March. It's upping its investment in Ather 2. Coming to Hero Motor, the world's largest two-wheeler company, you have any information on what it's looking like, what its plans could be? Would it buy out Ather, even though Ather wants to remain autonomous?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I don't know what their plans are, to be honest, but I think one would imagine that they have to be part of the EV race. Look, Hero Motors for me is a classic example of a legacy automaker which is very slow to react because their profits are so rooted in IC engines. And this is really the problem with all legacy brands. because the IC engines are making so much money, so much, you don't want to sacrifice those profits for something like EVs, which frankly, the margins are very thin or non-existent at all. But I think the writing is on the wall. So I think from a Hero standpoint, the way I would look at is, I don't think they have any in-house capability to develop EVs. Basically, the in-house R&D is not a patch on, let's say, Bajaj or TVS, the other local players. Their only option is to buy, acquire, and that's how they would enter the EV race. But I think it takes a lot more than that. You have to have someone with really their sleeves rolled up who understands this space. And frankly, we've seen that. I mean, Elon Musk is a classic example of someone who really knows the technology. I mean, he's an absolute genius in that sense. And that really is eventually what's going to be needed in this very, very disruptive, and transformational, period we are in. As technologies evolve, it's very dynamic, and you have to be at the cutting edge of that. And, you might acquire something today which is outdated tomorrow, but you need the person at the helm to take those right judgment calls.
BVR Subbu, if I could come to you, we saw, and I know you're on the board of Ola Electric, we saw how the company tried to disrupt the market with its aggressive pricing, how it was lapped up. We saw delays that took place. Now there are upgrades from the S1 to the S1 Pro, with, Bhavish Aggarwal trying to be the Elon Musk on this side of the world. Final comments from you, because as the two-wheeler space is the one where all the action seems to be. Ola's doing it. Bounce is coming out with its bike in the month of March. You've got a lot of action when it comes to Blue Smart. You've got Rapido, which is also up as a target.
Well, let me first of all preface these comments by saying that I'm an independent director on the board of Ola. And whatever I say, I will not be speaking for, I'm not speaking for the company. So let me say that for a start. But I think it's important to recognize that there is actually only one company that has gone from actual greenfield site to setting up a single location, largest manufacturing facility with a fully automated battery manufacturing plant, battery assembly plant with motor manufacturing also in-house and stuff. So I think, yes, there have been teething problems primarily because of component manufacturing. I mean, I must say this, one chip supplier has derailed, the initial thing, but it's picked up, and I would say that they're well on track to becoming the single largest manufacturer of EVs. But that's EV two-wheelers. But that's one. The important thing I think in two-wheelers is this: that I don't know how much the legacy companies understand software. That is absolutely critical. Now, in a company like Tesla, I would imagine there are probably more vice presidents handling software than vice presidents handling hardware areas, for instance. So that is tomorrow. How the way BMSs are created, the way the clusters interact with consumers, a bunch of electronics areas that will really make the difference between winners and also rans. I would categorically state that I do not believe except one legacy manufacturer. I don't believe the others understand software, almost as well as they need to. That is going to be their biggest, what should I say, stumbling block for them. It's going to take them time. It's not the same thing. Running a software company, a technology company, is not the same thing as running metal bashing businesses. And the way you handle people is completely different. 30 years back, Tata Motors decided, to create Tata Technologies, because it's not the same thing. You need a different mindset. You need a different mindset in the way you handle people. All that is something that I don't believe a lot of the legacy manufacturers understand, which is why they could find it difficult. Having said that, even amongst the companies that are getting into the business, I would say that unless they have really built up the building blocks in terms of manufacturing capabilities, in terms of software development capabilities, I don't think I would take many of them very seriously. That is going to be built. You cannot just say that I import containers from China, assemble something, and put it out into the market. That won't do.
So we'll have to watch out and see if the old legacy companies do end up eating oats for breakfast or not. So far, they have been betting on these EV startups, right? You got Ola on one side, Hero doing it with Ather. You've got Bajaj, which is invested in Yulu. You've got TVS, which has invested in Ultraviolet. Very interesting days ahead of us. This is a very nascent stage of the market as well. And interesting times ahead. And with that, I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us live today on this edition of The Market.